Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to day 12 of the Viva Supplementary EES hearings. For most of today it'll just be myself and Member O'Neill sitting. Member Briscoe will be joining us for the session between the morning break and the lunch break because some of those submitters have raised some issues that are within her area of expertise. Any preliminary matters to raise before we get started today? No? Okay. Well, first up, we have Mr. Allen, who's representing the Queenscliff Point Lonsdale Congregation of the Uniting Church. We have a written presentation from you, so we'll hand over to you to take us through that.
Thank you, Member Carlisle. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I might have trouble in hearing you, so I've got my hearing aids focused on that part of the room. So
Okay, we'll try and speak
we'll
up.
do our best. Good morning. My name is Richard Allen. I'm going to read most of this, and the help you'll have has a copy of it. So I may not follow it word for word, but it will be close.
Okay.
My name is Richard Allen. I'm representing the Queenscliff Point Lonsdale Congregation of the Uniting Church, where I've served as a member of Church Council for the past 25 years and currently its secretary. My professional qualifications are Bachelor of Architecture with Honours and Postgraduate Diploma of Town and Regional Planning. I've worked in both the architecture and urban planning professions at Commonwealth and local government level and in private practice in Australia and at county level and local government level in England. Thank you for the opportunity to present our submission to the Inquiry and Advisory Committee and for arranging for this hearing to be at a venue in Geelong. Much appreciated. The Queenscliff Point Lonsdale Congregation of the Uniting Church is totally committed to the cessation of its own use of fossil fuels in order to arrest the significant, scientifically proven and most adverse effects of global warming. We are working very closely with the Queenscliff Borough Council in the implementation of its climate emergency response plan and have currently completed about 90% of our out of gas and into renewables strategy for the replacement of gas appliances and equipment with equivalents using green electrical power. While we, in conjunction with our municipal council and our local community, are working hard to reduce our emission of greenhouse gases, particularly those generated by the use of gas in our community buildings, places of work and homes, we know that we cannot, by acting alone, arrest the adverse effects of global warming. It will take a united effort of all levels of government, industry and commerce, both in our nation and around the world, to achieve the necessary results. Our Church's National Assembly in 2022 committed to seeking net zero emissions from church activities by 2040. We note both the Victorian Government's target to cut the state's CO2 equivalent emissions to net zero by 2045 and the Commonwealth's commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 43% below 2005 levels by 2030, with a target of achieving net zero emissions by 2050. To reach these targets, we must take every opportunity available to change from fossil fuels to renewables. We consider it to be untenable for governments and agencies to approve projects such as Viva's gas terminal project, when to do so would run counter to the numerous actions ranging from those of individual citizens to others undertaken internationally to achieve immediate reduction in fossil fuel use and to cease its use as soon as possible. We are sometimes told that the gas extracted or imported will be used for such good purposes as steel production, or that Australian gas will be exported to be used overseas rather than locally. This type of statement cannot overcome the fact that regardless of the purpose for or location of the gas use, all the emissions produced will contribute to the significant adverse effects of the greenhouse gases on the same and only global atmosphere, leading to the global warming already being experienced around our planet. We believe that to continue to approve projects and enable continuing exploration, extraction, storage, and distribution, and even importation of fossil fuels, essentially for commercial advantage, will result in ethically as well as practically indefensible outcomes. We were very heartened that in September last year, after months of protest by community groups along Victoria's southwest coast, the international conglomerate behind plans for the largest sizing testing survey in Australian history has abandoned the endeavour to explore the Otway Basin for gas. On the 14th of September, several uniting church congregations and their ministers, including our own, had joined with members of organisations including Surfers for Climate, the Surfrider Foundation, the Gundjet Mara Traditional Owners, and Friends of the Earth in a non-violent protest at the 12 Apostles. By the 26th of September, that's within 2 weeks, the multinational TGS conglomerate announced that it had decided not to proceed with the Otway blasting plan, almost instant success. We acknowledge that in the relatively short term, we as a nation must address the need to assist people whose current employment in fossil fuel-based industries will be affected, support for retraining personnel, as well as developing emerging technology and manufacturing in the renewable energy field must be dealt with concurrently with the urgent need to get off fossil fuels. We are guided in our actions by our belief that humankind is charged with the responsibility to care for our planet in every way possible. We know that people of other faiths or none have similar beliefs and must all work together to arrest the harm being caused by greenhouse gas emissions. We heard from the European Copernicus Climate Service as recently as last week that the year 2024 was the hottest on record and the first to top 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. All 10 of the hottest years now have been in the past decade. The whole decade has been hotter than any others. This adds to our concern that failure to take every action available to us to change from fossil fuels to renewables will lead to irreversible damage to the planet. We're also concerned that failure to take action effectively and soon will have significantly greater effects on many Pacific Island nations, such as Tuvalu, Kiribati, and Fiji, owing to irreversibly rising sea levels due to global warming, as shown by recent NASA analysis. And our written submission includes a website reference which may be followed. We believe that we must, in the pursuit of social justice and equity, take action ourselves to assist people less able to do so and who are at greatest risk of the consequences. I acknowledge that many other submitters covering a wide range of expertise have already or are yet to present information to the IAC. I will not attempt to give any opinion on matters beyond my own areas of expertise. I do, however, in general value the expertise brought to the table by experts on the various adverse environmental effects and the effects on First Nation people's heritage. We, as a congregation, note and believe that Viva's proposal will also have many local adverse effects to be addressed by others at these hearings or in their written submissions, including restrictions to recreational boating and fishing, very large ships in Corio Bay disrupting other vehicles in the channels from Port Phillip Heads, not just in Corio Bay, to Geelong. Concern about dredging and blasting at the heads, and we've already had some channel widening at Port Phillip Heads, which had impact on coral reefs. We have concerned about unresolved safety, cultural heritage and environmental issues, and the visual and physical amenity concern for the residents of North Geelong. So they will make their own case, and obviously we're not arguing in the detail of those submissions, although we support the tenor of the submissions that I have briefly gone through. There's hundreds of them, hard reading and hard listening in some cases. But once again, I thank the IAC and its members, those present and those who will obviously see the written part of our submission, for providing this opportunity to present my congregation's views and its serious concerns about the Viva gas terminal project. I must say, it's from a different point of view from most of the residents. We don't speak on their behalf. We believe we have to look after our planet as our teachers. Thank you again for the opportunity to make the submission.
And thank you for the time that you took to prepare the submission and come and present it to us. Any questions? No. Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Member.
Okay, our next submitter, I think, is online. Dr. Cook. Do we have Peter Cook online? Okay, we might go then to Ms. Dunn. Good morning.
Morning, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
All right, let me get ready, sorry. Thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you today. I'm talking to you from the land of the Wadawurrung people in Ocean Grove and Geelong, where I live, work and play, and I pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'm a registered nurse working in Geelong and getting a bit breathless because I'm a bit nervous, sorry. And I've worked in emergency for most of my 30-year career, including the emergency department at Geelong's Barwon Health. I worked in busy emergency departments in Melbourne, around the UK, and for a small stint in India. Currently, I work as a hospital coordinator at one of Geelong's major hospitals, which means basically I'm in charge of the hospital. And I also teach the Diploma of Nursing here in Geelong. I'm a mother to an 18-year-old daughter and a local resident of the Bellarine. And in my spare time, I volunteer for Parents for Climate, who fought with the protest that Richard Allen was talking about earlier today to avoid any unsafe and unhappy future for our kids. I'm also well aware of the impacts of environment on health, having seen just about everything firsthand. So that's what I thought I'd talk to you about today, and particularly the effects of air pollution on our patients, which I believe is part of your criteria today. I was thinking about what I could talk to you about last week, given that you are hearing from so many people and so many organisations. What could I possibly say that would have an impact on your decision making? And so I thought about what happens when I teach my students on a Friday afternoon after they've had a big lunch and they're glazing over with eyes and they're having difficulty focusing on the content that we need to cover for the afternoon. So what is it that keeps their attention and keeps them engaged? It's the stories that I tell about my 30 years in emergency departments around the world. And I have some absolute rippers. I believe a lot of them are not appropriate for this forum, so I will keep it nice for you. I am going to rely on my colleagues from Doctors for the Environment, whose views I echo and wholly support, and who I believe you'll be hearing from later this morning. I'll let them tell you about the facts of climate change and health and why we don't want you to go ahead with this proposal. But what I'm going to do is tell you some stories about my patients and show you the real human impacts of air pollution on the health of our communities and why we need to say no to this proposal and any future effects, if in any future projects that affect the air quality of Australia and indeed the planet. So firstly, I'm going to tell you about why I love where we live. It is just stunning around here, and we love visiting the local beaches, walking and riding through nature reserves and watching the bird life from our kayaks on the river, and wondering how we got so lucky to live here. Even on my lunch breaks at work, I can take a breather from the classroom and wander down to take a look at the water of Corio Bay and the gorgeous scenery there. The area where this is proposed is a gorgeous landscape and a tourist destination supporting multiple small and large business owners. The mental health that comes from looking down on the waterfront and its surrounding beautiful natural landscape regularly cannot be underestimated, especially with the huge mental health issues facing my community. Rocking numbers of depression, anxiety and suicide among our youth. And I'd never want to be a part of anything that could worsen the already awful statistics of our region. I've looked after a lot of suicidal patients. They've given up and believe that the world, including their family and friends, would be better off without them. Some of them as young as 8 years old. There's a young boy who couldn't see a future for himself, who had no hope. And there's so many of our kids in this situation. So we need to stand up and advocate for them and show them that we have their backs and that we genuinely care that they have a safe future. Last month, a friend of ours died, and he was too young at 45, but he enjoyed an incredible view over the bay from his bed at the window in Bowen Health. Sorry, the cat's joining in now. It made me reminisce about the times that we swam and pier jumped together with my daughter, and that was just a small piece of light in such an awful situation for him. To look out and see that beautiful view. And that building of the gas terminal would have negated that view for him in his final days. The proposal for the gas terminal suggests that we need to provide imports of gas for our community in Australia, that we're lacking in gas, and we are not. I'd suggest that all scientific evidence based around health and fossil fuels advocates for moving away from gas. I'm sure that you're aware of the air pollution caused by the use of fossil fuels, increasing the incidence of health problems such as lung disease, heart disease, stroke, dementia, and many cancers. My own mother has emphysema. She grew up in an age where it was glamorous to smoke, and her father and uncles were even given cigarettes as part of their rations during their time as soldiers during the Second World War. She's always cooked with gas in the home, and she's trusted it. It responds quickly to her needs, and she's learnt to cook with it, even becoming a chef in adulthood and using gas at work. Last year, my parents bought an electric hob for their cooker, and they covered the gas cooker and simply popped that on top. And this led to a significant improvement in their energy costs, so Dad was really happy, and Mum's emphysema has now stabilised. Moving on to the hospital, where we also see significant breathing issues affected by environment, and particularly around air quality. So we have this occurrence almost daily in emergency departments called the 6 o'clock shortness of breath, which I don't know if you've heard of, but at 6 o'clock or near to that time on most night shifts, we prepare for that 6 o'clock shortness of breath. And this is a really big feat in an already full to overflowing department, where often as the nurse in charge, I would have had a quick break, which consisted of a bite to eat at the desk. So around 5:30, I'd make plans to clear a bay in a full to overflowing department. The patient is chronically unwell with lung and heart disease and has been struggling with their breathing, getting gradually worse overnight. By the time they get to early morning, they find that they just can't cope anymore. And this usually gets called in by the ambos on what we call the bat phone, who let us know that they have a patient who's severely unwell, who needs a resus bay and needs to be seen by a specialist doctor and ED nurse immediately on arrival. There's a whole specialist team engaged in the care of this patient. These patients arrive struggling for breath and terrified, and I wouldn't wish this on any family. Over the next few hours, they'll end up being stabilised and heading off to critical care areas like ICU, or simply not making it, which is devastating for everybody. Ignoring the needs of our community and continuing to approve projects that pollute our air will make these patients more prevalent and more unwell. Our hospitals already can't cope with the demand that we have. 12% of childhood asthma in Australia is attributable to cooking with gas appliances in the home, and that's what the AMA say. 11% of all Australians are asthmatic, and that's more than 1 in 10 of the population. So we need to move away from gas and the myth of it as a clean source of energy. I looked after a little boy once in the ED at Geelong. He was 4 or 5, big brown eyes and a big mop of blonde hair. And he walked into the kids' area with obvious shortness of breath. He looked so tired, and his nan, who had brought him in, confirmed that his breathing had been bad all night. His little chest was sucking in under the ribs, and he had a tracheal tug, which is where you get a sucking in at the skin at the front of the neck. And he had this awful wheeze. He was really struggling to breathe. He looked exhausted and he looked frightened. And I've seen this kid literally hundreds of times in various emergency departments around the world, and it's not their fault that they're sick. This kid was too sick to remain in the kids area, and soon he went to the resus area to be intensively treated and later transferred to the ward, having been stabilised. And it's this kid that makes me motivated to fight for better decision making. We need to leave this place a little better than we found it. I also have a teen who's disillusioned with the adults in power in our society. In her short life, bushfires have destroyed thousands of acres, and it's quite a good point to make today with fires still ongoing. Floods have destroyed homes, heat waves have claimed hundreds of lives. Use of fossil fuels like gas will continue to increase their prevalence. Natural spaces have been research proven to help with anxiety and depression, and taking away the natural beauty of our bay is another hit for our poor kids. for the wallets of local business owners, and for our patients in our hospital. Ignoring the tonnes of CO2 emissions that this gas terminal will release to contribute to climate change shows that we're not thinking of them and that we do not care about their future. I'm extremely concerned about this proposal to approve a floating gas terminal in our wonderful region. The area will become a ticking time bomb if something were to go wrong. And if an incident were to happen here, it would be up to me and my colleagues and our community to deal with the impact in an already overwhelmed health system. My colleagues and I and our students from our training organisation are all working in the hazard zone, so we would be directly affected. Viva's gas terminal will be a blight on our bay, and it will cause significant carbon emissions and contribute to air pollution. It will be a threat to our wildlife. It will restrict recreational use of the bay, threaten tourism and local business, and the proposed proximity to residents' houses is really frightening, creating a real threat to human life. I cannot imagine the effect this will have on the mental health of those residents. There has, I believe, been no recorded impact statement on First Nations cultural heritage, which I would assume would be a prerequisite for a project of this size. And our region is home to unique and diverse marine wildlife that is vital for carbon storage and must be protected. Finally, Australia must move away from gas. There's a declining demand and no shortage if we sell so much of it overseas. My own parents' change of habits in their 80s to cooking on electric due to the financial costs and to the effect on their health is not an isolated example. I desperately do not want to see another child or any kind of patient who's gasping for breath because we make the wrong decisions here today. We cannot undertake more projects that pour pollution into their environment. All we want for our kids is for them to grow up healthy and happy and have a safe life. I know that you have a golden opportunity here to have a massive effect on the carbon emissions produced here in Geelong. This is an opportunity for us to make change and transform and become a leader in the region's sustainability. And our future could look really bright. An estimated 24,000 jobs could be created if we develop in the field of renewables in the region, and that's a lot more than the 70 of the Viva gas terminal proposal. The mental and physical health of our community could improve. Cost of living for our community members would be reduced if we make sensible changes away from fossil fuels. We just cannot progress with business as usual. We need to say no to all new fossil fuel projects, including this one. I really strongly hope that this proposal is rejected so that we can invest intelligently and responsibly and move towards a healthier and cleaner future for our wonderful community. Our kids and our community will thank you for it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms Dunn, for those submissions. Any questions from Ms Dunn?
No, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming along.
Thank you.
Dr. Cook, we can see you online now. Are you ready to present? You just need to unmute.
I think after years of telehealth I'd have learnt that, but I'm that guy. Thank you for your time this morning and for taking my submission. I'm going to be fairly brief. I've read a lot of the background material that various environmental groups have put forward regarding the quite concerning environmental impacts of the proposed terminal. And I think they are extremely compelling, particularly with the unknown dangers of dredging and the poor quality of the marine EES statements that have been submitted to date. Also, the failure to appropriately consider Indigenous issues is, I think, a major failing. But the thing I want to talk about, because I'm a clinical psychologist, is insanity. I'm often confronted with patients who are in denial. Frequently, they engage in behaviours that have short-term gains for them, but disastrous long-term consequences. Sometimes they respond to logic and cognitive challenge, but that's not always the case. And frequently, they take actions that cause enormous damage to themselves and to people around them. Often working with those people is frustrating and perplexing, but sometimes there are constructive and positive outcomes. I think we're currently in a state of global insanity. We are hell-bent on destroying civilization as we understand it at the moment, and we're precariously close to it. Scientists have identified 9 major tipping points in the environment, and it's fairly likely that we've already gone past 3 of them, and we're rapidly heading towards another 3. And we don't know the consequences of exceeding those tipping points. But it's highly likely that in the next 10 to 15 years, the damage to our environment is going to be so profound, we're going to lose our capacity to do anything about it. Energy companies first identified the dangers associated with emissions and global warming decades ago. And their response to that was to hide their research. It's only recently come to light of day. And they did that so that they could continue maximising their profits. They literally put the financial well-being of themselves and their shareholders in front of the welfare of the planet, our children and our grandchildren. In recent years, we've had the IPCC, based on the best science in the world, state we have to cut emissions to net zero by 2035, and yet governments, companies and the like talk about 2050. And they're talking about cutting to stay below 1.5 degrees of warming. Unfortunately, we've already passed 1.5 degrees of warming. The Copernicus Institute is on record as demonstrating that 2024 global temperatures for the year were over 1.5 degrees, and it was the warmest world on record. We desperately need to cut emissions now, not in 2049, not in terms of some fictitious figure of 1.5 that no longer exists. There are other ways. There's the possibility of gas shortages in Victoria in 3 or 4 years if we continue with our current usage and we don't roll out renewables quickly enough. But they are only possible shortages. They are not locked in. I walk down the street in winter and I walk past cafe after cafe that's burning gas out in the open air to keep customers a little bit warmer, and rather than moving inside. This is insanity. We have people heating their houses in winter to 24, 25 degrees so that they can walk around in t-shirts. It's insanity. It is taking action that is leading the world down a path of virtually guaranteed destruction. What we need instead of more gas and more gas terminals and bringing more gas into Victoria and creating more emissions is a massive public education campaign. We may have to modify our lifestyles for a few years during that period of time in which there's, based on current usage, insufficient gas, but that can be done. We need the renewables put in place quickly. The alternative, we take those sort of actions and people modify their lifestyles. We don't have a gas shortage and we don't need a new gas terminal. It can be done, and it should be done for the benefit of the future, for our grandchildren. Because to continue on with what we're doing, business as usual, oh, let's have another terminal, let's bring more gas into the state, let's create more emissions, is insanity. And I don't want to be part of that. And I would hope that the learned people who are participating in this inquiry will share that view as well, that this is not just business as usual. We are already in a state of crisis, and we don't know how quickly the impacts are going to come or what they're going to be. And to continue just doing what we've been doing is, as I've said, it's either insanity or greed. You pick. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your submissions, Dr. Cook. Any questions for Dr. Cook? Thanks for the time you've put in and coming along and speaking to us.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Mr. Rafalowicz. Is Mr. Rafalowicz, I'm apologising if I'm not pronouncing your surname correctly. You online? No. Ms. Marsden-Smith, is Sophia Marsden-Smith online? Okay. All right, we'll just stand down for 5 minutes and hopefully those submitters will join us. Okay, do we have Ms. Marsden-Smith online yet? I think you're in the process of joining, so we'll just give you a couple of minutes. Ms. Marsden-Smith, hello.
Hi, how are you, Sarah? That's Carl.
Very well.
Lovely
We
to
can
meet
hear
you
you loud
again.
and clear. Now we've got some speaking notes from you and we've got a presentation from you.
Yeah.
So we'll hand over to you to take us through it.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm just going to share my screen as well for my PowerPoint. Can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Yes, we can.
Perfect, wonderful. So, good morning, members of the committee. My name is Sophia Marsden-Smith, and this is the view you can see from my home at the Geelong Grammar School, Corio campus, within the middle school precinct. I am currently teaching at Geelong Grammar as an English, Literature and History teacher, and I am the Coonawarra Middle School Girls Tutor in Residence within the middle school precinct, living on Foreshore Road. I am here today as a concerned resident and not on behalf of the school. This is my baby daughter, Dorothea. She and my husband, Ryan, are the lights of my world, and it is for them I am presenting today as well. In this photo, you can see the current babies on campus, all of who were born in 2023 and one in 2024. And these are the families and the babies' lives Viva's floating gas terminal will ultimately adversely affect. So it's a typical Saturday morning at 8 a.m. as we begin middle school rowing. The icy winds roll off the bay and whip me in the face, but it's refreshing. You hear the seagulls squawk and the pelicans fly in en masse. The distribution of animals around the corner to the north of the Ramsar wetlands and the south of the Corio Quay are abundant, from snubfin dolphins to rainbow lorikeets. The birds don't care about the boundaries. They are in abundance in and around the bay. GGS itself feels like a wildlife sanctuary with the numerous bird and wildlife we have in and around the school due to the close proximity of the Ramsar wetlands. Around you can see the fishermen fishing to the right of you and the GGS sailing and Corio clubs to the left. Next you hear the eager middle school rowers keen to get their boats onto the water, eager to begin their Saturday rowing session on the lagoon. Throughout the 2 hours, eager kayaks come and go, and spectators come to watch the rowing, as well as cyclists using the trails and runners running back and forth. This is the beauty and hive of activity that make up Limeburners Bay and the Ramsar wetlands. As we pan from my left with the Corio Sailing Club to the northwest side, we would see, if approved and constructed, the Viva floating gas terminal. The Viva floating gas terminal on my right, on the northeast part of the bay where the fishermen regularly fish. This is not a private space used by Geelong Grammar. The bay is a public space open to all, and it has a multitude of uses from sailing clubs, rowing, people fishing, kayakers, bird watchers, walkers, bike riders, and joggers. It's the main bike path between this part of Geelong and Lara. We used this bike path extensively for our students to practice the JVBR, including the first trial ride on the exact road where the floating gas terminal will be. Moreover, the Ramsar wetlands, as part of Limeburners Bay, have black swans, cormorants, pelicans, magpies, galahs, sulphur-crested cockatoos, rainbow lorikeets. And all of this exists in an environment which has previously been subject to heavy industry, but it has been given a chance to bounce back. So where will all of this go if Viva is allowed to build their floating gas terminal? I strongly fear that it will all go away, never to return. Successive Victorian governments have failed to effectively implement policies to reduce the reliance of Victorian households on gas for cooking and heating. Aggressive gas cooktops and heating conversion strategies is what is really required to reduce year-on-year Victoria's heavy reliance on gas. The government has acknowledged that there is a climate emergency, so there is a need to respond proportionately. Anemic incremental responses will result in us sleepwalking into climate catastrophes and energy insecurity. How is it possible for Victoria to meet its climate commitments by actively investing in new fossil fuel infrastructure, which effectively enables ongoing and increased imports of LNG? We should be moving away from gas and fossil fuels, not towards it. The recent Grampians and Californian bushfires show all too readily the disastrous effects of climate change on the environment, to which gas is a big contributor of this. Limiting global warming means we must have a carbon budget. It means we must reduce emissions as aggressively as possible now. Increasing our ability to import LNG is not being stated as a temporary measure. There is no commitment from Viva on a firm facility lifespan or import volume limit. Essentially, Viva is proposing to build a gas terminal that will run 24 hours a day for an indefinite period. It is in Viva's best interests to maximize imports and resist government or community initiatives to reduce domestic gas demand. Viva is not a good neighbour. There is no direct communication from Viva to households close enough to hear warning alarms. We have no idea what unscheduled events are occurring or how serious they are. The terminal frequently schedules odour releases and loud, intense venting on weekends. These events are potentially out of sequence with local government and EPA standard working hours. This is an image here of the Viva burning gas early one morning with no warning, and that was taken by my husband Ryan at the Corai station while he was waiting to catch a train to Melbourne on Monday the 21st of February. And earlier this weekend, there was a lightning strike on the 12th of January where there was a massive burn-off and sirens and alarms going with no warning to residents on campus until much later, and we felt in a state of stasis. Should we leave or should we go? We weren't even sure. And Viva is essentially conditioning residents to ignore alarms and reducing the likelihood of effective evacuation of neighbours in the event of an actual emergency. At times, we have to close off vents and windows as unannounced discharge events occur and sulphur-like smells enter our houses on campus. Residential housing that is occupied year-round is amongst the closest sensitive receptors to the peer expansion and treatment facility. We can hear loud, ongoing mechanical processes, plus the venting and flaring from the current and terminal operations. The noise we hear, especially on weekends, is often continuous and unpleasant. This is all relevant because the same operational culture and lack of consideration for the amenity expectations of neighbours is likely to be prevalent at any new gas terminal and treatment operation. Viva appears to be an organisation that notes that it meets its government requirements for pollution and discharges to the environment, but we are not hearing any spruiking of initiatives that go above and beyond the minimum requirements. Certainly, there is no promise to improve conditions in the bay, no assurances of remediation of any sites at the end of life for current and new facilities. The business model for Viva is to exploit current fossil fuel reliance and translate this into profits. There is no advertisement of non-fossil fuel assets held in trust to rehabilitate contaminated or degraded sites, including the proposed gas infrastructure once it reaches the end of its life. Geelong has been asked to own all the risks and the environmental burdens of Victoria's addiction to gas, and the benefits entirely privatised and limited to the time in which the facility is profitable for Viva. How is Viva Energy investing in fossil fuels during a window where we actually have to reduce our energy intensity going to contribute to the health and general well-being of people who live in the vicinity of the bay? Where is your social license? If Viva actually did investments into renewable energy, there would have been actual benefit to Geelong as people, and you would have the same people sitting here actually supporting your operations. Geelong Grammar is the school I want to send my children to, especially with the new primary school being built north of the Corio campus. Our littlest learners will look out from their campus and see the destruction caused by this abominable bright red LNG floating gas terminal. But it is a genuine fear of mine that this future will be impossible with the Viva gas terminal being built, with the risks for safety, health, and lifestyle. The Viva educational video speaks of the reuse of seawater and essentially discharging cold seawater to the bay. Why doesn't the video talk about the harmful dredging of the bay, how chlorinated the processed seawater will be? It ceased to be seawater once it's in the bay. We are now talking about cold, salty, polluted brine being sent into the bay, which has been treated as an industrial sewer. The whole process relies on us tolerating the dilution of waste in the bay. The distance of the floating terminal from Geelong Grammar School is stated within the video as being over 1 kilometre away. However, the proposed pipeline and processing facility is within hundreds of metres of the school and is immediately adjacent to the main access road, School Road. This is not some distant project within a heavy industrial area. It is an expansion of fossil fuel facilities immediately adjacent to one of Australia's most exceptional educational institutions. We love the bay and the Ramsar wetlands. We don't want to tolerate adverse effects from the construction of the new terminal and associated infrastructure. These photos were taken 5 days ago of 100 black swans or so, and a site that is so beautiful and befitting of the area. But in the background is the proposed site of the Viva floating gas terminal, and if this gets up, it will disrupt one of our national creatures' natural habitats and making seeing them a rarity, a memory of the past. I am also an Old Geelong grammarian, or OG, who was a student in the day boarding house in Fraser. I remember the precautions we had to take for the noxious gases that would come off the Shell refinery. We had a warning siren to alert us, which went off twice in my time at school. This is not an environment I want my students, future children, current children, and I to live in Corio Bay. The floating gas terminal is marketed in Viva's energy education material to have an expected lifespan of 20 years, but it will create a permanent footprint in the bay, permanently disturbing this Corio Bay seafloor within the vicinity of sensitive wetlands. Geelong Grammar is the school that made me want to become a teacher, but a teacher at GGS's Corio campus, and this is the final school for me, the one where I am dedicating the rest of my teaching career to. This is because it is a very special school and a place I do not want to see marred by Viva's floating gas terminal for my teaching career, my students, or my children. As an OG, a current teacher and a GGS Corio resident, as well as a current parent, we want a future for us and generations to come. But this will not be possible if we allow for unmitigated, human-caused climate change. The proposed gas terminal is short-sighted, profit-centred project that does little to benefit the people of Corio, North Shore, or any of the users of lime burners or Corio Bay. Thank you.
Thank you for your submissions, Ms. Marston-Smith. Any questions?
No.
Thanks again for the time you put into preparing them and coming along to present to us today.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Santa Carla. Have a lovely day. Thank you all.
Okay, Mr. Rafalowicz, am I pronouncing your name correctly? You're just on mute.
Yes, yeah, it's
Okay.
Joe Rafalowicz or Joseph Rafalowicz.
Great. Okay, we're ready when you are, Mr. Rafalowicz.
Sure, thank you. sorry, I've got a baby in the background. I'm on parental leave at the moment, so I'm also somewhat underprepared. But you can see from my submission that I'm a local resident of Jan Juk on the Surf Coast. And so, you know, my submission highlighted some of the local impacts in terms of Corio Bay, and in particular the dredging of the bay. But I think that the thing that I want to emphasize in my spoken comments today is that the government, the Victorian government, is concerned with protecting the local marine environment, underwater heritage matters. And if we allow a continued dependence on imported gas, the emissions that are created through scope 1, 2, 3 use, but also if we as reasonable people predict out what will happen to our energy system in Victoria, if we continue to infuse it with new supplies of gas that are imported from maybe overseas or maybe from Australia, we continue the dependence on a fossil fuel, which is causing climate change, which will destroy our local ocean, just like it destroys all global oceans, because it simply does not discriminate on that basis. And I'd refer the panel to, there was a recent hearing, I think that it was a special hearing of the High Court, and it was to do with a legal advocacy group called Environmental Justice Australia. I think it's colloquially known as the Living Wonders case. And it was a federal matter, and it was protesting these approvals of the coal mines by the federal environment minister under the EPBC. And essentially that legal group was arguing these individual coal mines shouldn't be approved because they'll have this global impact, and that the change in carbon in the atmosphere will result in localized environmental impact, and therefore the EPBC could apply the Environmental Protection Biodiversity Act. The court rejected that in the end, but the judge did leave open the possibility that if something was at a scale that you could draw that causality between the amount of emissions created and the impact, then that it makes logical sense. And so we can't look to that legal case, that being federal. This is a state environmental process. But I would just ask you to turn your mind to that logic. Every time we approve some piece of infrastructure that embeds fossil fuels in our system, instead of investing in the transitions that are readily available in places like Victoria, we condemn our environment in the long term to severe impacts. So, you know, this panel, rather than focusing on, okay, well, is the dredging going to be too deep to affect this one species? We're missing the bigger picture, which is that accepting a role for gas into the future for Victoria will cause severe environmental and probably cultural impacts. So that's my whole submission.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ravalowitz. Any questions?
No, very articulate. Thank you.
Thanks for coming
Thank
along
you.
and presenting to us today. We can see you juggling a lot of different responsibilities, so thank you again.
So first public hearing, obviously.
Which you've done
I'll see
very
you
well.
later. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's all our submitters from the first session this morning. So we'll take our morning break and we'll resume at 11:50. Okay, next up we have Ms. Wilson. Hello.
Hi.
Oh, I should just mention also that Dr. Brisger is joining us for this next session as well, so you can see her there online. She's another one of the committee members.
Okay, great. Are we ready to go?
We're having some volume issues. I'm not sure if that's at this end, Ken. Could you try again?
Me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jem. Can you hear me?
Yep, that's better.
Okay, great. I'll start. My name is Jem Wilson and I live in North Geelong. Can you hear me okay? It sounds like there's
Yes.
a feedback. Okay.
Yep.
My name is Jem Wilson. I'm a former journalist and public relations advisor, and I want to speak my concerns about the impact of the Viva project as a local resident. I moved to North Geelong because I love the coast and community here. You may think it's an industrial area, but as locals, we see the unique wildlife in Corio Bay and its importance to First Nations cultural heritage. I walk my 2 dogs along the shores of Morpannel Park near the Viva gas terminal almost every day. I'm worried that Viva's plans put Corio Bay's fragile marine ecosystems at risk, including an internationally protected Ramsar wetland. Viva wants to bring 300-metre-long ships into the Corio Bay shipping channel. Our walking, fishing and picnic spots are going to be destroyed for this climate-wrecking project. The previous speaker mentioned the Living Wonders climate cases, and I actually worked at Environmental Justice Australia doing communications on those cases. The cases challenged Australia's Federal Environment Minister's refusal to consider the climate harm of new coal and gas projects. The cases highlighted that Australia's national environment laws are broken and full of holes. The Labor government has now reneged on its promise to overhaul these broken laws. When our national environment laws were introduced in 1999, the BlackBerry phone had just hit the shelves and Bill Clinton was being impeached. Times have changed, but our environment laws have not kept up. That means companies like Viva can use the drug dealers' defence to ignore the climate harm of their projects. They can say that if they didn't sell the gas, someone else would. So the climate harm of their project doesn't matter. So legally, you may be able to ignore the climate risk of Viva's gas plans, but what about morally? We're living in an extinction crisis. Ecosystems are collapsing. Australia has one of the worst extinction records on Earth. As we've seen with the California wildfires, climate Armageddon is here. The International Energy Agency is unequivocal. There can be no new investments in oil, gas and coal from 2024 because the development of new oil and gas and coal is incompatible with limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. We're now headed far above 1.5 degrees because these projects keep going ahead. If you keep approving projects like Get Viva's gas proposal, we're creating a planet that will be unlivable for our kids. The science is clear. We are in a climate crisis, and every new coal and gas project is pouring more fuel on the fire. The projects we approve today will return to us tomorrow as bushfires, floods, and drought. The community doesn't want this project, and I urge you to refuse it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Wilson. Thanks for your submissions and for coming along and presenting to us today.
No worries.
Next up, we have Mr. Chomley, who I think is here. Hi, Mr. Chomley. Hello.
Thanks, Jem. I'm just here to back Jem up because that was awesome. Yeah, my name is Lockie. Hello, everyone. It's good to be in the room with you all. I'm a Norlane resident of 6 years, and I grew up in Geelong. My parents are just here behind me. I firstly just want to speak about my connection to the bay and to the ecosystem of Corio Bay. I go swimming at North Shore regularly. I go there with my friends and their kids, and we play at Morpannel Park in the water and just like, yeah, in the park there. I go spear fishing in Corio Bay, and I go swimming. I swim at North Shore, and I swim out to the buoy or to the whatever the marker that marks the shipping channel. And it is so important for my well-being to be able to use that bay and to connect with it and to see all the life that is there. And so I am really concerned about the environmental impact that this project poses for the bay that I hold so dear. I'm worried about turbidity from dredging, to not be able to see all the fish, the bream, the snapper, the nudibranchs.
The which?
They're these little orange slug things that they're like orange and white slugs that get around on the rocks, the
Wow.
nudibranchs, look them up. I'm worried about the FRSU discharge, changing the water temperature and just like degrading the quality of the water. I'm worried about the effect on the seagrass, which, as we know, the seagrass community supports a whole array of life. I'm worried about the seals and the dolphins that call that place their home. So yeah, I feel like I'm just gonna talk about some more stuff now that's kind of not to do with my submission, but I thought I may as well try and use this time well. I thought I'd just talk about what I know, and I know that humans are a part of the natural world, like undeniably. We eat food that's grown by the elements, the sun shines, the rain falls, food grows, we eat it, we go to the toilet. I know we do. And our well-being is inextricably linked to the health of our natural places, of our environments. I know that we're a custodial species, we're a caretaker species. And so the decisions that we make as a species affect all of the beings that we share this place with. I know that. I see this proposal as part of an old story, like a confused story, where humans have kind of lost this understanding of our role in the ecosystem, where we've lost our connection with place, we've lost our sense of purpose, our sense of custodianship of culture. And I guess I see this broadly as like a colonial perspective. And so like, yeah, it's been a few centuries now of this story existing in this place, and we can see the effects of that locally, and obviously we can see the effects of that across the whole planet. Like Jem was talking about, like global warming, this old story is killing the planet. And I guess I see that we're all responsible and we're all complicit. Like I go home and turn the lights on and make decisions that are a part of this old story. So I've wanted to introduce a few different perspectives into the room, because I thought it would be fun and theatrical. I've got the more than humans, and I thought I could just pass this around, like I can leave these here and you guys can just hold on to these. So we've got the more than human beings. I already talked about a few of them, but like I could be the Yuyangs, I could be Corio Bay itself. And I guess I just invite like all of us to consider what is the perspective of these beings? How do they feel about this proposal? You know, the Yuyangs has been sitting there the whole time since ships came into Corio Bay and set up this town. You know, they saw the Wadawurrung people living here in really connected ways. Like, I wonder what the Yuyangs think about this proposal. I've got a feeling the Yuyangs aren't into it. So this can go around. Do you want to try it out? You know, you could be a seal. He's looked up the nudibranchs. You could be a seal. You could be a dolphin. You could be a gannet. So next, I've got the ancestors. So I'll invite everyone actually to just take a moment, close your eyes and take a breath. And imagine that your ancestors are here in the room with you. Mine actually are. My parents are here right behind me. But, you know, you could go with the ancestors that you knew who aren't alive anymore, and then just imagine the line of people that goes back beyond them. And you can imagine that line going so far back that you're there with your ancestors who are living in an earth-connected way, who are in relationship with the land, who are foraging, hunting food on the land, who love the land. They're here in the room. And I'm wondering what they think about this project. Like, do they see this as being a beneficial thing for this community and this place? And now I want you to imagine that the ancestors of this place are here, the Wadawurrung ancestors. What do they think about this project? How do they feel about, this gas import terminal being constructed in the beautiful Corio Bay? So I'll pass the ancestors around. And yeah, the invitation is at any point, like if you just want a fresh perspective on the meeting, you can just hop into someone else's way of seeing it. So then lastly, I've got the future generations. So there. So let's imagine that I am someone 7 generations into the future. Yeah, I'm wondering what they want. I'm wondering if they want us to be working towards a new story, a new vision of how we exist in this place. Yeah, I can't imagine that they would want fossil fuels to continue to be consumed anywhere, but let alone in Corio Bay. Yeah, so I guess I'm also thinking about my descendants, my family, like what I want for my my kids. Yeah, so this is no pristine ecosystem in Corio Bay. It's been degraded and exploited since colonisation. But I don't think this means that we need to continue this story. I think we need to take responsibility for the mess that we've created towards healing and regeneration for all the beings that call this place home now and into the future. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Lockie. That was a very effective way of reminding us where we sit in the bigger picture. Thank you.
Future generations know how to give the document number.
Okay. Next up, we have Ms. Fisher. And we have a presentation from you, I think, Ms. Fisher. Okay, we're ready when you are.
Is it working? No, I've done wrong.
Are you wanting a hand with screen sharing?
Sorry, I don't. Excellent, thank you. Hello, members of the IAC panel, fellow community members and representatives of the parties. I want to acknowledge that this project is proposed to occur on Wadawurrung country. Pay my respects to elders past and present. I wish to thank the IAC for their diligent approach to the EES and the contribution by expert witnesses to help us understand this project better. I also wish to acknowledge the continued engagement of our community with this process, which has now dragged on for 4 years, with some of our most fundamental questions about the project still unanswered. I too am concerned about that it remains unproven that LNG carriers can safely navigate Corio Bay channels. We were told in the last EES that these studies were going to take 8 weeks to complete. Viva has had 2 years to complete these provide them to the regulator for review, and to use that information to inform the work within the SES. But it's chosen not to, and we're still left waiting and uncertain of the true impacts of this project. How much more time and resources will they waste? I've had the privilege to watch many of the hearings and read many documents, which has helped form my opinions regarding this project. I'll begin by providing you with some context regarding what projects our community wants regarding the energy transition, examine the SES regarding threatened and migratory birds before closing with some recommendations. Doesn't work.
I think that arrows work better than the scroller.
Anyway, who am I? Sally Fisher is my name. I'm a resident who's had long-standing connections with Geelong. I followed the project since we first learned about it via the media in 2020. I'm a volunteer leader locally and nationally in the ACF, one of Australia's largest environmental NGOs, which focus on climate action and the protection of nature. My paid work, I'm a community organiser with the Real Deal Geelong Alliance, which I'll describe. This gives me a very grounded sense of what the community needs in this critical time for taking action. Geelong is doing it really tough right now, with rising levels of distress being felt by parts of our community. In the northern suburbs, things have significantly worsened across many measures. Despite these enormous challenges, opposition to this project remains strong. We need solutions and projects which are going to alleviate, not add to the burdens of residents. Many of our residents live in housing which is so energy inefficient, they no longer even use their energy gas heaters, or if they do, they find themselves with staggering bills which push them into further hardship. The gas industry claims importing LNG will somehow improve supply, and somehow this will reduce the price. But if we keep exporting domestic gas from the East Coast to fulfil LNG export contracts, we'll fail to see how this will happen. The leaky bucket remains, allowing local gas to exit the system to be replaced by energy-intensive imported LNG, which is even more expensive. Furthermore, the introduction of LNG into local domestic supplies will mean our local gas prices are pegged to global prices, ramping up the cost. We don't need projects which are false solutions. We need projects which will generate hope and long-term stable jobs which will address the climate, rising cost of living, make homes livable, and which don't divert resources away from genuine solutions. So what is the consensus regarding real solutions amongst civil society organisations in Geelong? I'm employed as a community organiser to establish an alliance of civil society organisations called the Real Deal Geelong. These organisations are coming together for the common good and are connected to people who are experiencing the problems I've just outlined. The alliance is backed by 12 civil society organisations with over 46,000 residents in relationship with them, and it is growing. It includes unions, faith groups, community centres, health and housing organisations, and environment organisations. We work together on jointly endorsed solutions, which we believe will deliver benefit for the most disadvantaged in our community. We've developed a shared policy agenda, some of which relate to the energy transition and are shared on the right of screen. This includes advocating for government investment, which will enable all households to benefit from energy efficiency and electrification programs to generate the jobs of the future. At our recent forum, the Deputy PM backed our call for a just energy transition, and the federal government has since committed $500 million for programs to deliver home energy upgrades for social housing in line with our advocacy. That's a good start, but we need our government to be spending more on projects which help the community to reduce their use of gas. We don't want public money diverted into subsidising fossil fuel projects such as this one, if the dredging required is much greater than anticipated and costs blow out, as occurred in Gladstone. This would be a very poor use of public funds when we have a community in deep hardship. My concerns with the SES was that the SES did not include recent sightings of the critically endangered orange-bellied parrot or register the significance of these. I don't believe the survey work undertaken in 2021 was capable of detecting them. The environmental risk assessment screenings did not appear to have been correctly applied to the Ramsar area, resulting in a downgrading of the recommended level of assessment from detailed to a moderate assessment. Of course, until we know the extent of the dredging required, it's impossible to determine the marine impacts truly, which will potentially link to the Ramsar site. Dr. Lane gave evidence emphasising that the level, duration and seasonality of turbidity due to additional marine impacts, such as dredging, could impact on rocky reefs, MPB and the seagrasses, which support the migratory shorebirds in particular. He acknowledged that this could take years for seagrasses to recover if impacted, and if the seagrasses were impacted, then we would need to revisit the impacts of the project on shorebirds. I assume that Dr. Lane conducted his review probably with little knowledge of the possible magnitudes of greater dredging, which Mr. Norman outlined yesterday, which may be required to make the 30 kilometres of channels navigable. He may have assumed that things like navigating the channel would have been settled by now. He did his review, assuming the dredging would only be 490 cubic metres. And as he said, he accepted the marine modelling at face value. But as Mr. Norman and Ports Victoria's tabled letter on Monday suggests, we still don't know what further dredging will be required to make the bay navigable for these massive LNG tankers. Dr. Lane was also assuming it would only be a temporary 8-week dredging program, not a project which extends 30 kilometres through the bay and which may take several years to complete. But he did express his reservations if there are wider impacts along that Ramsar coastline. And of course, magnitudes greater dredging requires one ginormous spill ground to dump all of this material, and that is currently located much closer to the Western Treatment Plant. This is the problem with not knowing the full extent of the project before we try to understand the other impacts. It undermines our confidence in all the work that is connected to the rest of the project. It can't be viewed in isolation of each other. This is what the IAC asked Viva to do regarding threatened and migratory birds in its 2022 report. These are the Minister's directions regarding threatened and migratory birds. Since the EES, Viva has updated and done a peer review of all the listed threatened migratory bird species located within 5 k's of all parts of the project. No new survey work has been conducted since the last EES, only further analysis of the original 2021 shorebird survey with marine modelling based on a limited volume of dredging. Viva's initial and updated list of threatened birds within the 5 kilometre zone did identify 2 sightings of orange-bellied parrots at Avalon Saltworks and Limeburners Bay in 86 and 93. The good news is that the orange-bellied parrots are showing signs of a comeback. In 2016, there were only 17 parrots remaining in the wild. Captive breeding programs have resulted in birds being released into the wild, which is showing signs of promise. In winter 2024, 21 birds were reported across mainland Australia, the highest count in a decade, with some returning to places where they hadn't been seen in years. 10 birds were seen at the Western Treatment Plant, 8 on the Bellarine. Clearly, the orange-bellied parrot is persisting near or within Ramsar areas which hold critical salt marsh habitat. The SES did not document their sightings nor their significance. 10 birds is approximately 5% of the total number of birds. This site is only 5 kilometres further along the Ramsar site from the Avalon Beach, and of course, birds do fly to different locations to feed. Was this recent data regarding these sightings considered by the proponent, and was further data sought from BirdLife Australia researchers? Is it possible that other birds have returned to the sites within the 5 kilometres zone at Limeburners and Avalon Saltworks, given they have been sighted again in South Australia despite an absence of years? Shouldn't we try to find this out and then assess whether other impacts are likely, rather than assume that they're not there and not impacted? The photo on the right is of some ACF Geelong members at Avalon Beach on an excursion with an orange-bellied parrot researcher in 2023. He told us that the parrots could potentially use this habitat. Now turn to the studies conducted in the last EES in 2021. Critically, only 1 survey was done in winter when the parrots were present in Victoria. The rest were done in summer. As you can see, only shoreline locations were selected, not inland where the parrots were previously seen and where they may extend to. 2021 bird survey sites were not done along the section between Avalon Beach and Point Abiona, which is closest to the refinery pier. I spoke with Ryan Kilgour, who leads the parrot research at BirdLife Australia at the Western Treatment Plant. He said there are significant knowledge gaps regarding the range of the orange-bellied parrot, as most surveys are done by volunteers who tend to cluster their bird watching in sites where the parrots are easier to find, such as the Western Treatment Plant, rather than less surveyed sites. He says that there is a need for professionally funded bird watchers to go to the less surveyed areas along their entire potential rangeland. Overall, I wonder if there has been a genuine attempt to find any parrots in the 2021 survey, and if more could be done to look for them in the surrounding Ramsar areas, now that we know they are building back and returning elsewhere in the rangeland. One swallow doesn't make a summer, but I think 10 orange-bellied parrots surely does make for a promising winter, given their low numbers, and this deserves further exploration. Now I'd like to look at the environmental risk assessment ratings that were used by Dr. Wallace to determine what levels of assessments were required. I would argue that the screening criteria used by the proponent has not been applied properly in the case of the migratory birds and threatened birds in the Ramsar site that they depend upon. In the first column, I would suggest that the project provides potential for significant temporary or localised permanent impact, scoring a 1 or 2. In the second column, that the asset is nationally significant, as Ramsar, score of 3, and that there is a broad community and stakeholder interest in protecting the orange-bellied parrot, score of 3, and a desire to protect the Ramsar wetlands which support them. This gives a screening rating of 7 or 8, not 5, for threatened and migratory birds, as is calculated in Table 4-3, shown on the right. This underestimate has resulted in the proponent not conducting detailed assessments, such as detailed investigations across all stages of the project via the ecosystem pathways through which these birds could be impacted. Dr. Edmonds presented a potential pathway by which the migratory birds could be impacted by impacts of on the Ramsar by the project. However, these pathways were not investigated, nor baseline studies for many species reported, so we remain uncertain regarding the possible impact of the dredging on the Ramsar and MNES. I wish to propose some recommendations for the IAC to consider. To require the proponent to commence baseline studies immediately across a much wider range of species over multiple seasons, so that we can detect changes to the ecosystem which supports threatened migratory birds in the nearby Ramsar area. And request further studies of OBP's habitat within the 5-kilometre zone of impact around the project. And these should be conducted when the birds are present in Victoria. This survey work should be funded by the proponent, but conducted by community organisations experienced in locating these birds, such as BirdLife Australia. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Fisher. You obviously had some detailed speaking notes there. We've been taking notes as you've gone, but if you're happy to provide those to us, that would be very helpful to us. Any questions from Ms. Fisher?
No, thank you for your submissions.
Member Brisgett, any questions for Ms. Fisher?
Just one question in relation to the, I'm echoing. Just a question in relation to the orange-bellied parrot sightings you referred to subsequent to the EES. Are they documented anywhere?
Yeah, I've got a link in the presentation to that. It's on the BirdLife Australia website.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for the time you put into those submissions and presenting to us today. Next up, we have Ms. Chapman, who I think is online.
Hi. Can
Hi
you
there.
hear me?
Yes, we can. We might
Excellent.
just, if you can just give us a couple of minutes to just take the screen share down so we can see your face a bit better.
No worries.
Fantastic. We're ready when you are.
Cool. Hi all in the IAC panel. Thank you for the opportunity to present today at this SEES hearing. My name is Jess and I'm a Geelong community resident. I have lived here my entire life and recently brought my first child into the world here, who will hopefully be a resident of Geelong well into the next century. I'm no expert in the specific scientific factors being reviewed as part of this SEES. So all I can say is that I reiterate the reasons already presented by those with more expertise than me that mean that this proposed gas import terminal should be rejected. These include omissions in the cultural values assessment and limited reporting on marine ecology and dredging. For these items, I defer to and reiterate the submission by Environment Victoria. Additional reasons for rejection include the safety risks to the community that live close to the proposed site and shipping path, which are of substantial concern, as well as air quality concerns for residents living nearby, with there being no safe levels of VOCs. For these items, I refer to the Geelong Sustainability, ACF and EV submissions and reiterate those. If I may speak briefly as a concerned resident on items beyond the remit of this SEES, it is upsetting that we even need to meet here today to review this proposal that does nothing to positively act towards reducing the carbon we are emitting into the atmosphere and likely only locks more in through the usage of extra gas. It's my newborn son's loss of a livable future for Viva's current financial gain. We must be doing everything we can to ensure a viable climate well into the future that is as safe for our communities as possible. The proposed gas import terminal is antithetical to this. Thank you. That's all from me today.
Thanks, Ms. Chapman. Thanks for coming along and presenting to us.
No worries.
Okay, Darcy Dunn is up next. We're ready
Hello.
when you are, Mr. Dunn.
Okay, great. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining from Wadawurrung country, and I'd like to acknowledge their unceded ownership of these lands, waters and skies this project sits amongst. I'm a Geelong resident and I oppose Viva's gas import terminal in Corio Bay. While I realise that the terms of reference set out particular aspects that the panel can consider, I think that the fact that climate emissions and the strategic energy policy that's linked with this wasn't and couldn't be a factor at the hearings due to the terms of reference and the lack of policy to assess the project against demonstrates the flawed nature of our society's response to the climate emergency that we face every day. The intergenerational inequity that is caused by our lack of ability to act promptly and effectively to stop polluting projects like Viva's continues to be a moral and process failure, simply because there is nothing to point to in our regulations and legislations to say that ruining the climate isn't allowable. Viva's rhetoric is based on AMO shortfall projections that have continued to be extended beyond the time frame originally suggested by Viva, i.e. the shortfalls continue not to eventuate. Victoria continues to replace gas appliances with efficient electric ones, saving households money in the process and contributing to reduced emissions. Coupled with strategic demand reduction measures for peak days, this could replace the need for this terminal, saving carbon emissions money, improving community health and minimising disruption at the same time. Recent evidence has also demonstrated conclusively that the argument often made by the gas industry that gas is a transition fuel, greener than coal and crucial in our energy transition, as wishful or deceitful communications from the gas industry. A peer-reviewed article in the journal Energy Science and Engineering in 2024 found that the greenhouse gas footprint for LNG as a fuel source is 33% greater than for coal when analysed using a 20-year time period. Even considering on the time frame of 100 years after emissions, which severely understates the climatic damage of methane, the LNG footprint equals or exceeds that of coal. To address the limited items of consideration of this supplementary EES, I'm concerned about the following remaining items. The extent of dredging seems less than what is likely to be required due to Viva continuing to push off the safety and navigational study. Just like in the first hearing, Viva is requesting that the panel sign a blank check that the marine impact will be within allowable parameters, yet failing to fully describe the likely extent of dredging required to bring in extremely large and dangerous tankers into Corio Bay. Corio Bay has a very narrow and shallow entry channel, as been discussed throughout the original EES, which might need dredging to allow the safe passage of tankers, and the mooring area is also insufficiently deep to allow manoeuvring. I'm concerned about the impact of dredging and the increased vessel movements in Corio Bay and the impact on the adjacent Ramsar wetlands. I urge the panel not to see this area as already affected by Viva's own refinery, such that it's a degraded environment not worthy of our protection. I'm concerned about the air quality impacts from the operation of the FSRU. Poor air quality is a major contributor to disease, and it has been established that there is no safe threshold for pollution. The fact that the FSRU does emit various pollutants of concern so close to residents in North Shore and the northern suburbs in general is deeply problematic and continues to put the health of those residents at risks. I'd like the IAC to pay close attention to the additional marine studies conducted by Viva to ensure that they are appropriate and accurately describe the environment. In particular, the seagrass mapping seems only to be completed in smaller areas rather than a broader area, and the environment is highly dependent on this nitrogen from the seagrass roots. Viva was also requested to complete 12 months of monitoring, as I understood it, and has appeared to have completed around 9 months of monitoring instead. I'm concerned that this analogue that Viva is choosing to make between water temperature and chlorine plumes, as to whether or not this is an accurate analogue for the actual chlorine impacts. One of the things that I believe Viva claimed was it was impossible to measure chlorine in the field at the sensitivity required, and I'd like the IAC to interrogate whether that's actually true. I'm also concerned about the muscle testing approach for measuring chlorine uptake, which was what Viva chose to do, given that it's only been studied over a shorter time period, and we know that fauna and flora can bioaccumulate chemicals over a long time period. Is there concern that over a longer period that more significant levels of chlorine would be found? In conclusion, I'm concerned that the EES process continues to be ineffective when the panel has to consider such a narrow band of impacts, typically focused on the immediate environment, when the broader context is that we are in a climate emergency. And the emissions caused by the importation of gas will contribute to making this problem worse globally. I encourage the IAC to question the evidence put to it by Viva in determining if they have adequately addressed the concerns from the first EES submission, considering in particular the proximity of Geelong residents to the proposed terminal and the impacts this will have on their health, amenity and safety. Thanks for hearing me today.
Thanks, Mr. Dunn. Again, some detailed speaking notes there, including some references to some studies. And if you'd like us to have a look at those, if you could send through your speaking notes, that would be much appreciated.
I think they're all, I don't really think there's anything I've added beyond my written submission, Sarah. Okay. So I think that the study that I mentioned is referenced
in that. Okay, great. Thank you. Any questions from Member Brisger or Member O'Neill?
No.
No. Thanks, Mr. Dunn. Thanks for coming along and presenting to us today.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Ms. Dillon.
Hello. Good afternoon, Inquiry and Advisory Committee. Today I'm presenting as a concerned citizen and a young person who has already stood before you 2 years ago at the age of 18 opposing the same project. Now at 20, I find myself raising my voice again against Viva Energy's proposed gas terminal in Corio Bay, and I must admit that this feels particularly disheartening. When this project was initially delayed, I held on to the hope that Viva would recognise and respect our community's decision and clear opposition. I believe that they would understand that our rejection wasn't just a temporary setback, but a reflection of my community's values and vision for our future. Unfortunately, we now face what appears to be the proverbial third act revival of a proposal our community has already rejected. But unlike those predictable films, the stakes here are very real. This isn't about entertainment, it's about our bay, our community, and our future. In the 2 years since I first spoke against this project, I've been studying environmental science at Monash University, and the reality of what we're facing is even clearer. During this time, we've witnessed unprecedented climate events such as record-breaking heat waves, devastating floods, and intensifying bushfires. These aren't just case studies in a textbook, they're real events affecting real people. And so my studies have only reinforced what I instinctively knew when I first stood before you, and it's that we cannot afford to build new fossil fuel infrastructure. As someone who will inherit the consequences of today's decision, I am deeply troubled by several aspects of this project. Firstly, the climate impact. The proposed terminal would be responsible for 600,000 tonnes of carbon pollution annually. This isn't just a number, it represents stolen years from my future, more extreme weather events I'll have to endure, and ecosystems I will never get to see in their full glory. By locking in gas infrastructure for decades to come, you're effectively locking in climate damage that my generation will have to deal with throughout adult lives. The weight of these decisions has taken a very real toll on my generation. Since I was 15, my anxiety and stress have been inextricably linked to climate inaction. Each new fossil fuel project feels like another weight added to the shoulders of young people. And now at 20, and just at 20 years old, I find myself grappling with deeply personal decisions that no generation before me has had to deal with, including questioning whether to bring children into the world. Not because I don't want them, but because I question the morality of bringing new life into a world where their future seems increasingly precarious. Secondly, the marine environmental concerns. The unique ecosystem of Corio Bay, with its internationally significant Ramsar wetland, deserves protection. This is an area where my family and I walk every Sunday to reconnect with the local area, and it's where I can finally breathe again. The inadequate baseline monitoring and potential impacts on seagrass communities affects this area's equilibrium. This natural heritage should not have to be sacrificed. And then thirdly, the safety and community impact. The proximity of this terminal to 30,000 residents is deeply concerning. I currently live in the affected area and hope to build a future near the bay, but the thought of living near a facility handling dangerous materials with insufficient safety modelling and risk assessment is unacceptable. Victoria has in the past shown leadership in transitioning to renewable energy. This project represents a step backward, one that contradicts our climate targets and undermines our progress towards a sustainable future. 2 years ago, I stood before you as a freshly turned 18-year-old filled with hope and determination. Today, I stand before you again, not just with personal conviction, but with 2 years of scientific education that has deepened my understanding of what's at stake. The science is clear, the impacts are visible, and the time for action is now. Please do not let this be another instance where the voices of young people are heard but not heeded. I urge you to reject this proposal and instead support initiatives that will give my generation a fighting chance for the future. We deserve a fighting chance. With hope and with fear, Lauren. Thank you.
Thank you for that submission, Lauren. Any questions from Member Briscoe? Member O'Neill?
No.
Thanks for coming along for a second time. We remember you from the first time round. Thanks for coming and speaking to us again.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Doctors for the Environment Australia. Have we got Sweng Bayek on the line? Anyone from Doctors for the Environment Australia? Well, I think we will just need to start our lunch break a little bit early and we'll resume at 2:10. Thanks, everyone.
Mr. Townsend, we are reconvening.
Yes, sorry that our submitter has just joined us apparently online. Hello, Mr. Bayek. I'm probably pronouncing your name incorrectly. Can you correct me, please?
Oh, that's right. Beck. Beck is fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Song is fine.
Okay. Over to you.
Hello. thanks for the opportunity to present at the hearings. My name is Song Beck. I'm here representing Doctors for Environment Australia. I'm also a practicing rural general practitioner in Western Victoria. You would have our submission there. I suppose with these few minutes, just wanted to expand a bit on primarily air quality and also climate change and scope 3 emissions and the potential impacts on matters of national environmental significance thereby. So we did make a comment on the variety of potential emissions from this project, including, I guess, the main things of concern with a facility like this would be a species of nitrogen oxides and also volatile organic chemicals, or VOCs. Particulate matter not as much of a concern compared with, say, other petrochemical facilities. In respect of some of the evidence already tendered as regards to projected air quality from this thing, I would just make the comment that, and I may have missed this, but I would encourage the panel to consider this in making their decision, is that it looked like even the kind of worst case scenario that was modelled was still one that was only worst case in the sense of looking at the demand of the gas, looking at the function of all of the engines and boilers operating at peak demand. This seems to assume that all of the equipment is functioning as intended without failures. And we know that in the real world, facilities like this often have unintended equipment failures and sometimes catastrophic ones. There was the Freeport LNG gas export terminal explosion and fire in Texas in just 2022. There have also been, if you look at some of the other facilities offshore in Louisiana, the Cameron LNG gas export terminal, 67 documented unintended releases of pollutants in kind of 2 to 3 years after it started operation in 2019, I believe. So I would be concerned that some of these potential bad case scenarios have not been factored in looking at the impact of the air quality area. And I think, you know, in terms of the interests of public health for the community, that would be of paramount consideration in making sure that this isn't an additional risk that's being imposed. Obviously, these are quite big operations, and there's a significant degree of material being processed. So these are not negligible risks in terms of potential emissions. And as far as I could see, these were not kind of analysed or addressed in the air quality evidence that I saw was tendered. So I'd make that comment on kind of the direct air emissions from the facility. I would also make a comment on the air quality of domestic use, which a lot of this gas would be directed to, and the fact that introducing a facility like this will tend to lock consumers into further gas use, and this in itself, use of domestic gas for heating and for cooking in particular, does represent a real risk of health impacts. We've kind of documented specifically that risk of asthma is very markedly increased in households that use gas for domestic cooking. So this is really something that we should be looking at supporting households to transition away from. And there are very good alternatives for energy sources for heating and use in cooking. And this is really what we should be doing in the interests of public health. I mean, I make the general observation that air pollution is implicated in 1 in 5 of deaths worldwide. So more than smoking. So this is a very big issue. And I would hope that these impacts are taken into account when making any decisions on this project. I suppose the other comment I would make on modelling of the proposed emissions of this project are also changed weather conditions. If the modelling was looking at kind of the 2016 to 2020 weather conditions in making its predictions, and also any kind of safety modelling as well, I guess. I mean, I'm sure the panel members would be aware that in the last year, global temperatures were 1.6 degrees above the 18 to 15, 1990 baseline, and are only going to get worse. And everyone will be well aware of what's happening in LA. That is certainly something that we are subject to very much increased risk of here in southeastern Australia, and levels of risk that we have not seen thus far. So in terms of analysing the safety and the risk of a proposal like this, we do need to take into account changed weather conditions, changed incidence of severe weather conditions, and whether that's been applied to the modelling of emissions, not sure. And finally, making a comment, I'm sure other people have commented on this already, scope 3 emissions of this project. In terms of the terms of reference, one of the kind of keystone matters of national environmental significance is, of course, the Great Barrier Reef. Has been subject to kind of catastrophic levels of risk in recent years with the levels of ocean warming that we've observed. Shocking levels of ocean warming in the last 12, 24 months has left many climate scientists very puzzled as to how this is happening. So I'm sure the panel members will be aware. A project like this should have a responsibility to analyse in great detail the additional contribution it will make through its direct and downstream effects on emissions, because it may, I mean, if we're locking in a future essentially without a Great Barrier Reef, that is one thing that is kind of mandated to consider in something like this. But also generally speaking, in terms of the magnitude of climate impacts across the world, of which we will be quite exposed where we are, something that we should be considering. So yeah, I guess that was the kind of substance of the additional comments that we kind of wanted to emphasise from our submission, and also kind of commentary from some of the evidence that was tabled since, as far as that goes. I'd be happy to, if the panel had any questions about specific health impacts, to prepare a document with a list of references, if that would be useful, or if there are any other questions that I could take back to our organisation to prepare a specific response to.
Okay, I'll just check whether we have any questions now. Dr. Brisgott, any questions for Sung? Member O'Neill? We have one question for you from Member O'Neill.
Sure.
Thank you for your submission. You made comment relating to the unintended consequences, the unintended events and the impact of air quality, citing 67 documented cases of unintended releases of pollutants, etc. Just the source reference, there's one of the documents in the submission is document 7, permit to kill potential health economic impacts from US LNG export terminal permitted emissions. Greenpeace document. Is that the source document? The link I've only read the summary. What's the, I was cutting to the chase, what's the source document for that reference that you made about the 67 documentation? Are you aware?
I can certainly forward that to it's not the Greenpeace document, it's another, I guess, it's another organisation based in Louisiana that has been examining some of these gas export terminals. I can forward the link to the panel via email if you would like.
Thank you. That'll be good.
Yep.
Thanks for your submission. It was very clear.
Thank you, and thanks for your time in coming along and presenting to us today.
No worries. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. We'll take our lunch break now and we'll resume at 2:10. Okay, our first submitter for this afternoon session is Mr. Lim, who I think is submitting online. Are you there, Mr. Lim? Hello.
Hi, how you going?
Good, thanks. All right, we're ready when you are.
Right, I'll just share my screen. Just wondering if you can see that.
We can.
Excellent. Sorry, I'm in the car. I'm at my daughter's cricket, so I'm getting a bit of echo, but I'm just hoping this will work out. All right, so I appreciate your attention and thought for this short time I am here. I'm not trying to take up too much of your time, but I just think it's worthwhile speaking up and showing my concern. I'm not an expert in environmental issues by any means or the impacts of fossil fuels, but a citizen of Geelong who sees an opportunity for the stories being written to change their course and to empower hope. I think too, I'm someone who works with young people and leadership, and in the way that they grow and present themselves as they develop in that very early stage. And one thing that I think is so powerful is the essence of hope and how you manage that and how you spark that in our young people. And often it's what happens around them that helps shape that story. So the story that I want to share with you is relevant to Tim Winton, who was published in the Age newspaper not long ago. And it's about his book, Juice. I'm not sure if you know of it or not. Sorry, I'm just getting my notes up in front so I can see them. And he wrote it, and it's basically just looking at the societal issues that might come with climate change in the future. But I think it's more his travel and how he went across the travel. Are you still looking at my story there?
Yeah, there's a slide that says, oh, yep, now we've got a headline from The Age.
Yep, great. Fantastic. So he went and he visited a whole range of different areas, and what he was getting was an interesting story, similar to what I get when I talk with people locally about this sort of thing, because I wonder why they're not taking action and what's happening. And his experience, and I quote, he says, fewer and fewer Australians seem to believe that the government's rule in their interests, and they're frustrated and they're pent up, but they've got this aspect of apathy is kind of what he affirms. And I experience comments from people within our community saying, what's the point? Well, it'll happen anyway. They'll pretend to listen and do it anyway. And it's really concerning, I guess, that they're so disengaged with the story of their community. So in that space of apathy and the disconnect and then unwillingness to dream a better one, I guess I'm wondering, is it intentional? Is it the way we want our community to be, or should our community be helping to shape their story and feel like they can? And so this disconnect with the story of their community seems to happen when the same story is on repeat, and then they're void of any spark of hope. And as I mentioned before, when I'm working with young people, it's the one aspect I really want to target is what's that spark that they're tuned into, and what is it that really relishes the hope. So I believe that we can all contribute to the shifting story, and some have more power over the narrative than others. Viva create the story that they can be the saviour for the gas shortage, and I love their role in this. I don't play Viva as the villain in this story, just opportunistic, and I argue that financial gain is their core motive rather than the needs of the community and that they see this as an opportunistic moment. But what is apparent though is the current narrative is based on fear. It's that gas shortage in big headlines. And so when you're trying to spark hope and the narrative comes from a place of fear, it tends to call for immediate action. And often these fast track solutions without space or deep thought, solutions that lack creativity, longevity of thought. And we know that humans are better than this. They just need that little spark of hope. So from my point of view, I believe this is a sliding doors moment. And I speak about it and I'll continue to stand up and represent the community if I can. But I just think the same story being on repeat is not a good enough representation of who we are. We are moving towards Geelong being a creative city, and I'm excited by that. Moving beyond the industrial age and a clever and innovative city, a city with hope. And supporting this, I think, if we look at the fact that we've got, sorry, just skipping verification there. Asking me to, sorry about this. It's not liking me share it because it's on my work. But basically I'm looking at Neil Bunyell, the new Geelong Convention Centre that's being put forward, and the way that the state and federal government have backed this $450 million commitment to build the positive story and the story of hope. And I believe this is a transformational turn in the story, a story that invites the world in and a real spark. But what I'm wondering, I guess, is this sliding doors moment when Niall Bunyell translates directly to open your eyes to the hills, Wadawurrung language and endangered language being brought to life for every visitor in this space. Each visitor advocating for the creative and innovative Geelong story will come to this area, and these views will tell that story for years to come, unless the door slides, because if you choose the gas terminal and the hills become obscured from view, the $450 million spark of hope will disintegrate into a constant reminder of dull thinking. Each visitor that attempts to open their eyes to the hills will only see the enormous gas terminal. We know the size of it, we know how it goes, we know the impacts, but it's a constant oppressive reminder of the destructive footprint we've placed on Wadawurrung land. A view that ensures our citizens see the same story on repeat and sink deeper into their state of apathy, disconnected from the story. But I don't think this will happen. I believe that you guys will help support the eyes on the hill remain open and continually spark that story of hope and a community with a reason to be inspired. So from this massive investment, this investment of hope, the $450 million Niall Bunyell, I help share that story of hope for this city, and I believe that you'll help contribute to that as well. So thank you for giving up the time for me, and I appreciate that. I'll stop sharing now, but I just wanted to give a little passionate plea on why I think it's important for us to have that constant reminder as we look out from that wonderful place being built at the moment.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for coming along and presenting to us today. I don't think we've got a copy of your slides, so if you want to send that through, just send them through to the panel's email address that's on all the correspondence you will have got from us.
Yeah, I'll do that, and the links to those articles and things on there.
Great, fantastic. Thanks, you.
Sarah.
Oh, hang on. I think we've got a question from Member O'Neill.
Yes.
Your written submission was different to today's presentation, which is well and truly fine. Because we couldn't really see you very well because your screen was taking up most of the. Were you reading from, or were you ad-libbing today? I was just wondering if you had speaking notes that you could share with us.
I can send it through. Yeah, I've got a script I can send through.
That would be great, please.
Yeah.
And I didn't catch where you were, Mr. Lynn.
I'm actually down in Hamilton at the moment at my daughter's Geelong cricket. They're on a cricket tour at the moment. So, yeah, that's where I am currently.
Oh, yeah, no worries. No, all good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks for your time.
We have Roman Gopert, who I think is joining us online.
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We just can't see you yet. So have you got your camera switched on?
Yeah, I've got this camera switched on, but for some reason, when I hover over the camera symbol, it says there's no available camera. So I don't know why it doesn't work. It was working before
Okay.
when we tested it. I'm not sure how come.
No,
I
that's all
could.
right. We can hear you, so you might just have to talk us through. Do you have anything to present, like a screen share?
No, I don't have a screen share as such.
Okay.
So yeah, well, I'm Roman. I'm presenting today from my home in Marshall in Geelong, and as you can probably hear from my accent, I'm not born in Australia. So my background is German, and I moved to Geelong in 2012 from Brisbane. So I've lived here ever since 2012. So about 13 years now, and I really come to love Geelong and the community. And yeah, this is why it's such a topic that's so dear to my heart. And I just want to sort of give a perspective on the whole scenario about gas, and also that the government sort of really creating this atmosphere of fear, and that it's that we're running out of gas, which in my opinion is there's a lot that can be done, that we can basically transition to a renewable power. So my wife and I, we built our house here in Marshall, and we knew from the start when we were designing our house that we wanted to not use any fossil fuel. So we didn't want to use any gas, and not even a day we had any gas appliance running in our house. So we're using a hot water heat pump for hot water. We got solar panels on the roof, and that basically provides free electricity to charge our electric car and to run our heat pump, well, during the day while the sun is out. And for heating, we got an induction stovetop. So it's, in my opinion, it's really sort of outdated now to connect to gas these days. And with the state government of Victoria having made the good step to ban new gas connections to any residential homes from, I believe it's the start of last year. That was a really good step. And so I don't think this opinion of gas shortage and that we're running out of gas is, I don't think that's real or true at all. The other thing that really concerns me about this whole project is the amount of dredging that will be needed. So from another project similar to what is planned for what they're planning for Geelong. This is up in Gladstone. You might have heard of what happened there with the dredging. So the operator there who was dredging to basically make the channel for the gas LNG tankers to come in, they were dredging the channel. And that operator, basically, they excavated that spoil or that mud and stuff out. And what they did, they stored the spoil in a reclamation area behind what they call a bund wall, which they knew, or they should have known, that bund wall was not really adequate to stop any of that spoil from escaping back into the harbor waters. And that's what happened. So that spoil escaped and then contaminated the waters in the harbor. And now, as a result of that, this caused a lot of harm to the commercial fish stocks, all the seagrass, crayfish, fish that live there. And it affected the waters from Gladstone, so up in the vicinity of Yeppoon, all the way south to Fraser Island and even down to Bribie Island. So I had a look on Google Maps. So if you drive that distance in the car, it would be 7 hours and 41 minutes or 664 kilometers. And now the fisheries, they have actually launched a legal action. They've launched a class action against the dredging operator. And because they basically now have to import fish, they're not able to use the fish that they catch there because they're so contaminated and toxic from the fish basically taking up and eating all the toxic waste from that spoil that got leaked back into the waters. So that's a huge problem that would potentially happen here in Geelong as well. And especially, this is very concerning also about the Ramsar wetlands, which is very close to where the dredging will be happening. And that's a very significant site for the local Wadawurrung people, First Nations people, and there are a lot of threatened species living in the Ramsar wetlands, such as the Australian painted snipe and the vulnerable growling grass frog. So that's just two examples of the species that are living there that are very endangered. And so any disturbance or contamination from dredging would place all these animals and the marine life at severe risk. So that's something that I find very concerning. And the other aspect is, I mean, I live in Marshall, so I don't live in North Shore or really close, but they have been doing testing in Canada. It was a company called Sandia Labs. I believe that's in my submission as well. And they've basically done a testing what happens if an LNG tanker would leak, and if there would be a leak, the gas, because it's so compressed, it would rapidly expand and then form this vapor cloud that would expand really quickly. And then if it would come in contact with oxygen, it could then ignite, and the flame ball would be able to reach a height of 150 meters if it would ignite. And anything within 500 meters of radius of the tanker would be killed by freezing or suffocation from the gas cloud. And if it would be ignited, the shock wave would create a fireball about 1.6 kilometers radius, and anything like forests, buildings, anything would be burned in that radius. So that would be well and truly within the area of people's houses and people living, even potentially the Geelong CBD. So they're really, yeah, consequences if something would happen to a tanker, and nobody could rule that out, that something might happen, or there might be a leak, or it might run aground, there might be a technical issue. And this is just way too dangerous to have it in such close proximity to Geelong and our community. And in today's day and age, we could easily transition away from fossil fuels and really focus on rolling out clean energy. You know, with my car now, I drive to Melbourne, I charge there for 20 minutes, and I've got enough power in my car to drive all the way back to Geelong, and it costs me about $5 for the 20-minute charge. If I charge at home during the day, it doesn't cost me anything. Same with the electricity. If we all focus on ruling out batteries and solar for people's homes, or also people that are renting, that would be a lot more sensible than trying to focus on expanding the gas network. The other thing is too that, not sure if you're aware of it, but as you know, that the war in the Ukraine really affected the gas supply to Germany, where I'm from. So as a result of that, now at the moment, none of the public swimming pools in Germany that are heated with gas, none of them use the heater at the moment. So they're all using the water at ambient temperature, because they decided that the gas is just too expensive and they need to focus on where they use the gas. So I understand that Australia does have a lot of gas resources, but if anything happens, or eventually if they would run out, and we would be really dependent on other countries' resources, it's a really, really difficult geopolitical topic as well, because if suddenly a gas supply would be cut off, then if we're so reliant on gas, what do? We don't have anything as a backup or to transition to, which is a very, very difficult situation now in Germany. energy prices have gone up way more than in Australia as a result of this. And if we have so much sun in Australia, it's a no-brainer to not to pursue that and build more solar parks and also wind farms. So I just wanted to basically focus on that. And because I'm a father, I've got a beautiful daughter. Like I think his name was Matt, the person who was presenting before me. He's also got a family. So looking at the future, I'm quite concerned, and I feel like I want to do something so that in the future, if my daughter or my grandkids one day say, you know, why haven't you done anything, then I want to be able to say, look, I have made an effort. And so that basically wraps up my presentation. And thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gopert. Any questions?
No.
No, thanks for your time in presenting to us today.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye. Okay, next up we have Professor Chalmers, who I think is here in the room. Professor Chalmers, come up to the table.
I should begin by saying that I'm not very good. My hearing is not very good, and I left my hearing aids behind a couple of days ago in the country where I was away on holidays, and so you might have to excuse me if I need to get you to repeat yourself.
Okay.
I'm Professor David Chalmers. I was formerly Deputy Vice Chancellor at Charles Sturt University in Wagga Wagga, New South Wales. I was Professor of Plant Science and Horticulture at Massey University, Palmerston North in New Zealand. After that, I was Director of the Cooperative Research Centre for Viticulture in Adelaide, South Australia. And before that, I was Director of the Victorian Institute for Irrigation and Salinity Research in Tajura, Victoria. And I've been all my life a biological scientist with an enduring focus on the biology of the development, security, and protection of our biological systems for food production. I've also, during this time, had a lifelong concern for the security and survival of our fragile human environment. I was going to talk about seagrass, and I will briefly at the close of this short talk. But recent events have overwhelmed me, and I now think I have to have more important things than I need to say and need to be said. 2024 was the hottest year in recorded history. 2025, as we are already hearing, is going to be even hotter. Weather scientists are already saying we've already reached the dreaded 1.5 degrees of global warming we were challenged to avoid at all costs. That date was not supposed to be reached for another 7 to 10 years. And this, horrific prospect is looming large and more serious every day. These issues that scientists fear were going to challenge the Earth's population beyond 1.5 degrees of global warming have begun alarmingly, and as I hope to be able to demonstrate with this contribution,
will make the establishment of the Viva facility a reckless and stupidly dangerous development, especially for Geelong. Ahead of myself. When I drafted this paper during the last couple of months of last year, I began by describing the recent hurricane disasters at that time in the southern United States. Now, just a couple of months later, during the last week of these meetings have been running, wildfires driven by cyclonic winds during the North American winter are driving wildfires through the suburbs of Los Angeles. At this moment now, after a week of devastation, these rampant fires continue to scorch Los Angeles. Yes, that's right. Los Angeles, that classical model of American power and wealth, is being scorched and continues to be scorched right off the face of the earth. A full week after they began, forecasts now predict these fires are about to flare up again, with daily uncountable numbers of Los Angeles mansions and dreams and the consequent humiliation of the American dream itself. How can that be? Los Angeles, one of the biggest, richest cities in the world, in the process of being obliterated by uncontrollable wildfires during winter. I also pointed to floods in Europe during a recent past summer, which were washing away entire villages in Spain and in other parts of southern Europe. The flood defences of these towns were completely overwhelmed by these floods. These floods were unlike anything that had been seen before. Indeed, as an effect of weather prospects and events, all the world's people are rapidly being forced to realise and accept the need to prepare for much, much worse weather events as our climate undergoes radical, unknowable, devastating change. That's the stage we're in, and we need to pull our heads out of the sand. Yet first I heard about climate change, then the dreaded prospect of yet I first heard about climate change and the dreaded prospect of 1.5 degrees of global warming in my first year biology lectures at Melbourne University 60 years ago. We've known about this for at least 60 years. Now, 60 years on, and 1.5 degrees centigrade hotter around the world, and we are still looking for excuses to do nothing. As we've already seen, similar fears and anxieties to those I've touched on today have motivated many of the contributors at this inquiry. They, like me, fear that even more horrific, unimaginable surprises and shocks are in store for us as the global temperature continues to rise. After watching this fuse burn down for 60 years, I believe there is little or no place whatsoever for industries like Viva, who are digging in desperately and trying to derail or divert initiatives we all should be mounting to avert human catastrophe. Can you imagine the uproar if Visa proposed that they were considering the development of a storage facility for 0.5 megaton of LNG in Victoria Docks or Williamstown or even Altona for that matter? But why not? They could very well find a site where they did not need to plough a large channel through our beautiful seagrass. if somebody needs to help Victoria to get over this temporary shortage of energy, I say let it be somebody else. It does not need to be Geelong. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thanks for coming along and presenting to us today. Any questions?
Oh, thank you for your submission.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next up, we have David Huck, who I think is online. I think I saw you pop up earlier. Mr. Huck?
Yes, I'm here. Good
Great.
afternoon.
Hello, we can hear you.
Ah, excellent. Can you see me as well?
Yes.
Okay, great. So good afternoon, everyone. I believe I'm the lucky last, and I'm sure you're all happy to be going home early. My name's David Huck, and I'm a resident of Aireys Inlet and have lived here for about 10 years now. I'm a retired electrical engineer and strongly believe in the need to switch to an electrified future where the economy, residences and industry are all electrified. I think for that reason, the Viva gas terminal proposal is entirely the wrong strategy and actually a negative for our attempts to mitigate the effects of climate change. Looking through all the various submissions that have been made to the panel, I think, you know, the impact on the environment, on Aboriginal cultural heritage, noise, air quality, and obviously, you know, the impact on attempts to mitigate climate change have all been very thoroughly covered. I was interested to hear the last presenter talking about safety, because from what I can see in the submissions and from what I've read, and from talking to people like Geelong Sustainability, I think that's a topic that has not been addressed at all thoroughly. If you look at my submission, I've included a calculation of the energy content of an average sized LNG tanker. They can actually be twice as big as the tanker I used, but an average sized LNG tanker has the energy equivalent of 64 Fat Man atomic weapons of the sort that were dropped on Nagasaki. Following that, there's a graphic from a very authoritative site called NukeMap, which shows the impact, the effect of an explosion of that size centered on the proposed location of the Viva gas terminal. And you can see that it would produce a fireball radius of 1.5 kilometres, heavy blast damage up to nearly 2.5 kilometres, moderate blast damage to a radius of 5 kilometres, and thermal radiation strong enough to cause third-degree burns to a radius of nearly 12 kilometres. So obviously absolutely catastrophic. And I believe that the risk of that is not negligible or non-credible. If you look at some of the work that's been done, and obviously, you know, the causes of an accident like that, you know, it could be an accident or it could be triggered by a terrorist attack. And terrorist organisations, notable terrorist organisations such as Al Qaeda, have publicly stated that LNG terminals and tankers are prime targets. The risk has been analysed. The industry acknowledges the potential for vapour cloud explosions, although I'm not sure I've seen that acknowledged here locally. And typically, although they acknowledge the risk of a vapour cloud explosion, they tend to calculate it away. In a way, I think that's a bit analogous to the Fukushima disaster, where warnings were made of the risk of a catastrophic tsunami, but were dismissed until the event actually occurred. It is hard to find concrete information about this. Obviously, authorities don't want information that could aid in this sort of attack publicly available, and that's very sensible. But from what I can find, Sandia National Laboratories was tasked with assessing the risk of terrorist attack on LNG tankers, and the report on that in the Journal for Foreign Policy concluded unequivocally that there is a risk of that sort of attack.
Mr. Huck, I don't want to interrupt, but it's not that safety risks have not been considered. They were considered as part of the original EES, so they were considered in 2022, and there is further work going on in relation to risk assessments. So we did hear quite extensive submissions about the Sandia tests in 2022, but they're not before us right now. Our remit is restricted to the 4 relevant environmental issues.
Yes, no, I did anticipate you might say that. To me, this risk is pertinent to the terms of reference. You know, if there was an explosion or a fireball of this nature, then clearly there would be a massive impact on both the marine environment and on any cultural heritage, you know, on any land environment. So I think it is pertinent to this inquiry as well. I'm pleased to hear that you are assessing that risk. I think it's the onus is on the panel to make the people of Geelong and the region around it aware that risk is being considered and that there is such a risk, and that they will have to live with that risk if this terminal goes ahead.
Okay. Is that the end of your submission?
Look, I would like look, I think yes, in that case, I would be interested to hear from you if you are going to publicise that risk assessment or make it available in any sort of redacted form.
That's not a decision for this committee. It's not our document.
Whose document is that?
That's a Viva document, but they're dealing with the relevant authorities in relation to risk assessments.
Right. So
the
public doesn't really get a say in assessing the quality of that work or the level of risk.
Well, I'm starting to repeat myself, but that was part of this committee's assessment in 2022. But further work is being done, and I can't say any more about that.
Okay. All right. Well, look, I think I will end it there then. I think that was the safety concerns are my biggest concern. It's the location of this terminal, you know, which I think is entirely inappropriate given those risks.
Okay. Thank you for your submission. Thanks for the time you've put in and for coming along to present to us today.
No worries. Thank you.
Okay. That's it for today's submitters. So we will see everybody at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Yes?
Mr. Lim,
yes.
I understood Mr. O'Neill where he worked. I think that was the question. I just wanted to identify Mr. Lim is an employee of the school. He's presenting his own capacity, but just for clarity, he's an employee of the school.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
And do we give heads up that George is contacting people?
Yes. George is trying to contact all of tomorrow's submitters to see if we can have a slightly less gappy day, but we'll have to see how that goes. Okay, we'll see you at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.